What follows is merely a narrative reconstruction based on contradictory accounts and unproven theories. Nothing here should be understood as fact. The complete truth may never have come to light. According to accounts that circulated long afterward, the story is said to have begun on a morning of dry wind, when Lyria, my mother, crossed the iron gate of Horizonte do Vile School, with a brown envelope pressed tightly against her chest. Some versions suggest she disliked going there. She used to say the place smelled like a bad memory, as if the paint on the walls stored echoes. Even so, she would have gone because the principal had sent a curt note. Please attend to discuss a sensitive matter. According to a theory that emerged in whispered neighborhood conversations, the sensitive matter was not about me, as I had imagined. It was about her. Something from the past. Something the school seemed to have kept as if it were an object forgotten at the bottom of a cupboard. In the main hallway, where posters for old events still hung crookedly, Lyria would have been led to a small meeting room with a round table and 4 chairs. According to some versions, 3 people were there: Principal Salvia Ramirez, Coordinator Oren Belmonte, and a woman I had never seen before, introduced as Mirta, an alleged representative for administrative affairs. Names, titles, and functions change, depending on who tells the story, and that alone became fuel for suspicion. Reports claim that as soon as my mother sat down, the principal gave a smile that did not reach her eyes, and said something like, "We are here to clarify an episode." The word episode, according to those who heard it secondhand, was spat out as if she were trying to clean her own tongue. What happened next is told in different ways. One version says, Oren placed a tablet on the table and opened a folder with old photos, field trips, science fairs, graduations. At some point an image allegedly appeared of a courtyard, years earlier, with students standing in a circle. In the center, a person with their head lowered. Some swear they recognized Lyria there. Others say the face was impossible to see. The school, according to these versions, implied that my mother had taken part in something inappropriate at the time. The most repeated theory speaks of a cruel game among students, an improvised trial in which someone was exposed, ridiculed, condemned by rumors. The school, according to this narrative, treated it as a joke, and now, years later, it seemed to be trying to rewrite everyone's role, as if history were a canvas that could simply be painted over. The tone reportedly escalated quickly. There are accounts that Mirta slid papers across the table for my mother to sign. Generic statements, acknowledgments, requests to avoid disclosure. My mother, they say, read everything in silence, and with the pen hovering, asked only, "Why are you calling me now?" This is where the versions spiral apart. One says the principal answered with a sentence that made the air in the room grow heavier. "Because your name has come up again." Another claims the phrase was different. "Because someone is asking too many questions." In either case, the meaning seems the same. Someone had disturbed what was meant to stay buried. According to reports, the humiliation began when Oren, in a theatrical gesture, said that things needed to be put in order, and insinuated that my mother was playing the victim. Some say he spoke loudly on purpose, so the sound would spill into the hallway and reach people outside. And according to these versions, the principal added something like, "We will not allow a scandal. The school has a reputation." My mother is said to have swallowed hard. One theory holds that she did not cry because she learned early on that certain tears become ammunition in the wrong hands. Another, more intimate theory says she felt the same constriction she had decades earlier, as if the courtyard returned whole and formed a circle around her once more. Then came the detail that many people swear is true. Lyria opened the brown envelope. According to an account attributed to a former employee, inside were copies of pages from an old notebook, written in small, heavy handwriting. They looked like notes from someone who had witnessed something and kept it for years. Along with them was a flash drive taped in place. My mother placed everything on the table and said, in a low voice that, according to some, was more frightening than a shout, "I came because you summoned me, but now you are going to listen." The principal reportedly tried to interrupt her. Mirta hurriedly gathered one of the papers. Oren laughed briefly, without humor, and it is at this point that, according to reports, The door to the room opened without warning, and someone outside said, "Sorry. I heard my name." No one agrees on who this person was. Some say it was a young teacher. Others swear it was a former student, now an employee. There are even versions suggesting it was someone who should not have been there at all. What is known, or what is repeated, is that my mother stared at the open door as if facing a ghost, and before anyone could close it, she whispered, "So it was you, or was it you who stayed silent?" Versions suggest that in that moment, the past entered the room through the crack of the door, and no one there seemed prepared for what it carried. According to later accounts, the person standing in the doorway hesitated, as if stepping onto ground that might give way. Some describe someone named Aaron Calejo, pale-faced, badge askew, with the look of someone who recognizes an Other versions claim the name was different, and that the figure was female. The confusion feeds a persistent theory: there was more than one Aaron in this story, or more than one role being played. Principal Salvia is said to have stood up immediately, trying to regain control. "This meeting is closed," she would have said, but not with the firmness of someone in command, rather with the urgency of someone who realizes something has slipped away. Warren reportedly positioned his body between the door and the table, as if words could be blocked with shoulders. My mother, according to these versions, did not retreat. She pointed to the notebook and the flash drive as one might turn on a lighthouse in a dark room. "I didn't come to beg," she is said to have declared. "I came to According to a narrative that spread among parents and students, the humiliation she suffered, the old one, had been a trial in the courtyard, when Lyria was still a student. One theory says it began with a rumor about a missing necklace, another with a love letter found and read aloud. The details change, but the design repeats itself: a circle, laughter, pointing fingers, an authority watching from afar and doing nothing. What few people discussed was the second humiliation, the new one, the one that supposedly happened there in the room. Because according to reports, Warren said something that cut through my mother like a blade: "You always wanted attention. Now you've got it." That sentence, some versions suggest, was heard by someone in the hallway, then by someone else, and suddenly the corridor became a giant ear pressed against the wall. The school, which claimed to fear a scandal, seemed to be manufacturing one without realizing it. Some recount that my mother opened the notebook and read a passage aloud. It is not known for certain whether the text was a diary, a testimony, or a mixture of both, but versions insist that the words described a specific day, with date and weather, and cited the names of students and of an adult who allegedly said, "Let them be. This teaches." Some swear that this adult was not Salvia, but someone earlier, a principal from another time. Myrta reportedly tried to pull the notebook away. My mother held on. Warren threatened to call security. The principal asked for calm, and according to certain accounts, that was when her mask began to slip, because calm seemed to serve only the strong. In one version, Aaron, or whoever was at the door, murmured, "This shouldn't exist." In another, he said, "I knew someone kept it." These two contradictory phrases gave rise to an unsettling theory. Perhaps the notebook was only a copy, and the original was somewhere else. Then comes the flash drive. According to reports, my mother turned the small object between her fingers and said, "There are voices here." It is not known whether they were old or recent recordings. Some say they were audio messages from a group chat. Others swear they were leaked footage from internal cameras. There are versions suggesting it was all fabricated, and versions claiming the school built its own trap by keeping too much. What seems common across the stories is Myrta's reaction. She reportedly turned white as if recognizing something even before seeing it. "This is illegal," she would have said, and the principal added, "You're going to destroy your own child with this." This attempt to turn the tables, according to some versions, was what made my mother smile for the first time. A brief, weary smile. "You still think I came to ask for permission?" she is said to have replied. Outside, according to accounts, a teacher named Nedia Pontal appeared, drawn by the commotion. Then a doorman, then two mothers waiting for appointments. The hallway filled with people who did not know exactly what was happening. but recognized the scent of something forbidden. And then in a particularly repeated version, the principal committed the mistake that marked the beginning of the school's regret. She ordered the gate to be locked and cell phones collected, to avoid filming. This sounded like a confession to those who already suspected some. People reacted badly. One father asked why they were being treated like suspects. A mother said it was symbolic kidnapping. Someone began recording in secret, and the simple act spread panic among the administrative. My mother, according to versions, stood up with the notebook in her hand, as if it were a sacred document, and walked toward the door. Oren tried to block her. She said loudly enough for the entire corridor to hear. When I was a girl, you silenced me with laughter. Today you try to silence me with rules. But the oldest rule here has always been the same. Protect the school, not the people. A silence reportedly fell, the kind of silence that is not peace, but held breath. And that is when a detail appears that sends chills down the spine of anyone who tells it. Someone at the back of the corridor said my mother's full name, with unsettling certainty, Lydia Salvento, as if reading from a list, as if confirming a target. My mother turned her head. Her gaze searched for the source of the voice, and according to reports, she saw among bodies and backpacks a person holding an envelope similar to hers. Versions suggest there was more than one envelope, and that what was about to happen was not merely a reckoning. It was a chain reaction. According to contradictory accounts, the second envelope was delivered either by someone named Tomo Villar, a former student who had returned as an intern, or by a newly transferred mother named Gaze. The narratives disagree, but converge on one point. The person looked nervous, as if doing something that could not be undone. I thought it was just me, that person is said to have remarked, or something similar depending on the version. And the sentence reportedly altered the geometry of the corridor, because suddenly it was no longer the story of a single woman. It was the possibility of a pattern. Principal Salvia, according to accounts, tried to disperse the situation. This is an internal matter, but the word internal sounded like hidden. One theory claims that at that moment, someone began calling the police. Another says they called only a lawyer. In any case, the school's fear became something tangible. My mother carefully took the second envelope, as one might receive a letter from a dangerous place. Inside, versions suggest there were clippings from old local newspapers, without real names, only vague headlines about an incident and an extraordinary meeting. There was also a typewritten sheet, with an unsigned letterhead, describing containment procedures. No one agrees on the full contents, but many swear the word containment was there, and that by itself was already a portrait of a mindset. Meanwhile, Oren reportedly approached, trying to reclaim authority through aggression. You are inciting disorder, he would have said to my mother. She replied, according to versions, I'm just stopping pretending it didn't happen. This is where the suspense thickens, because some narratives suggest the flash drive was not the only piece of evidence. There was also an old school locker key, taped to the back of the notebook, a key with a number, and that number, according to theories, was linked to a decommissioned storage area in the school's basement, a place few students knew, but which older staff avoided, as if it were an unmentionable subject. One version says Aaron, the one from the doorway, turned pale when he saw the key. Another says it was Myrta who did. A third claims the principal tried to laugh and said, "This is nonsense," but the laugh failed. According to accounts, my mother said, I didn't remember the number, but I remembered the sound, and she struck the key against the table, producing a metallic jingle that made some adults flinch, as if the sound itself were a trigger. In the corridor, teacher Nadia asked, "What's in the basement?" And no one, according to versions, answered right away. The silence was the loudest response. A recurring theory holds that Horizonte, Duval's school, had undergone renovations and cleanups in previous years, and that documents had vanished. Boxes had been discarded. Files lost. The school, according to this theory, was not guilty only of the past, it was guilty of trying to erase it. Then the elevator door, or the side stairwell, versions differ, opened, and a man appeared, wearing a plain suit, and carrying a leather briefcase. Dario Lenkar, an alleged legal advisor. It is not known whether he had been called by someone or was there by coincidence, but accounts suggest that when he arrived, the principal breathed as if she had found a shield. Dario reportedly said, with studied calm, "Let's resolve this without spectacle." My mother looked at him as one looks at an enigma. "Without spectacle is how you like it, right?" Versions suggest she replied, "You made me a spectacle when I was a girl. Now you want silence." His presence changed the strategy. Instead of shouting, the school tried to negotiate. There are accounts of whispered offers, compensation, scholarship, settlement, private retraction, all conditional, all wrapped in bureaucracy. My mother listened as one listens to rain hitting the roof. Noise, but without meaning. According to versions, it was then that the person with the second envelope said something no one expected. "It's not just about her. There are current names." That sentence struck the corridor like lightning. Current names could mean present-day students, teachers, staff, living people inside a living system. The principal hurried to respond. "This is defamation," Dario said. "No accusations." Oren snapped his fingers, calling someone on the radio. At that point, according to accounts, the energy shifted again, because a short alarm sounded, not the fire alarm, but an internal security beep. Side doors were closed. People were redirected. The school, trying to control the situation, produced exactly the opposite. The feeling that there was something to hide. My mother leaned toward the person with the second envelope and asked, "Did you see it?" The person nodded and said, "I found." It is not known whether it was the same thing. The basement then became an inevitable destination. One version says, my mother walked toward the service stairs, with the key in her hand, and that Nydia went along as a witness. Another says they were stopped. Another says they went down only as far as the door and heard noises behind it. Boxes being dragged, paper crumpling. And the most repeated detail, the one that sustains the suspense, is this: someone had gone down before them, running, with dry footsteps, as if trying to extinguish an invisible fire. My mother stopped on the first flight of stairs, listened to the steps, and said quietly, "There they." Hook. End of part 3. Versions suggest that in the basement, there was something the school feared more than lawsuits or rumors. Something that, if seen, would change who was victim and who was accomplice. Part 4. According to accounts, the basement door was found locked. The number 17, almost faded, was painted on the metal plate. My mother inserted the key with a calm that did not match the chaos in the corridor. In some versions, the key turned. In others, the lock had already been replaced, and someone tried to block access. But one theory claims that even when the lock was changed, the old door still gave way, because renovations do not always erase what was built to hide. Nydia held her phone as a flashlight. The person with the second envelope stayed behind, hesitating. Iron, if it was him, went down as well, as if unable to avoid seeing. The smell, according to versions, was the first shock. Old paper, mold, metal, the smell of a dead archive. One theory speaks of stacked boxes, some sealed with yellowed tape. Another speaks of a steel cabinet, with rust marks, and a padlock too new to be innocent. At the top of the stairs, voices echoed. The principal, Oren. Dario, come back up now. This is a restricted area. Let's talk. But the words arrived too late, like an apology that crosses an ocean and lands in ruins. My mother reportedly found a box marked only with a geometric symbol, a triangle with a dot in the center. No one knows what it meant. Some say it was an internal code. Others say it was an inventory mark. But the same mark, according to versions, appeared on the second envelope. Inside the box, according to a narrative spread through the neighborhood, there were folders with lists, incident reports, and behavior records. And most disturbing of all, a set of mediation records that seemed to describe humiliations as if they were pedagogical methods. All of this, it must be stressed, only according to versions, never confirmed, never official. My mother leafed through a folder and stopped. Her face changed. Nydia asked, "What is it?" And my mother replied, "Here, my name is here, and the names of those who laughed." That sentence alone fueled the theory that the school had always known
had always catalogued, had always kept records, not for justice, but for control. Then, according to accounts, my mother found something that was not paper, a small cassette tape, unlabeled. Voices, she repeated. And then from the top of the stairs, Dario said, "That cannot leave here." Tension escalated. Oren stepped down 2 steps, trying to impose presence, without entering the archives smell. The principal said, "Liaria, you don't understand the responsibility." My mother replied, "According to versions, I do understand. I carried yours on my back for years." The school's regret, according to the narratives, began not as feeling, but as panic. What was meant to be a meeting of silencing became an accidental exposure. People in the corridor filmed the movement. Someone said, "Basement," out loud, and like every forbidden word, it grew. Some versions say the gate was unlocked in a hurry to avoid accusations of unlawful confinement. Others say it was opened because someone from outside arrived, a counselor, an inspector, or simply an influential relative. Nothing confirmed, but almost all narratives agree that at some point, the school tried to retreat, offer apologies, promise an investigation, create a committee, all wrapped in we will evaluate, according to procedures. But my mother, according to accounts, did not want promises. She wanted rupture. The most mysterious part comes now. What was on the flash drive? Some theories claim it contained audio of a recent conversation among administrative adults, speaking of covering up, preserving image, choosing a scapegoat. Other theories say it held old recordings, digitized, from a tape like the one found in the box. Still others suggest the flash drive was empty, and that its true power was psychological, making the school believe there was irrefutable proof. Whatever the case, versions suggest that when Dario saw the flash drive, he changed posture and whispered something to the principal. She closed her eyes for a second, and then said the phrase many repeat as a turning point. We were wrong." Even that phrase appears in variations. "We failed. We shouldn't have. We went too far." The lack of precision feeds the idea that the school never managed to admit exactly what it had done. True regret, however, is said to have come later, when the story began to escape internal control. According to accounts, parents started asking about containment procedures. Students began mentioning Locker 7. Teachers looked at the floor as if the floor had a mouth. And then in the most cinematic version, which may be nothing more than exaggeration passed from mouth to mouth, my mother climbed the stairs, with the notebook and the tape in her hands, and before crossing the corridor said loudly, "I will no longer carry this silence alone." The principal tried to grab her arm. Oren tried to seize the notebook. Nydia stepped in between. The person with the second envelope shouted, "Don't touch her." Someone cried. Someone laughed nervously. The entire building, according to accounts, vibrated like a speaker about to burst. And this is where the story ends, or pretends to end, because the versions become hazy. From that point on, some say my mother left with everything and never returned. Others say she left the tape behind as bait and left only with copies. There are theories that she handed the material to someone trustworthy, and others that she hid it somewhere no one would ever find. There are versions suggesting the school tried to recover whatever it could, and versions saying it was already too late, because what rots in the dark, once exposed, does not become clean again. The only thing many repeat, with the caution of those who fear lawsuits and ghosts, is that Horizonte do Vale School changed afterward. It changed rules, changed language, changed face. But according to versions, there was one detail that did not change. On certain afternoons, when the wind crossed the courtyard, some swore they could hear the same sound of a key striking metal, as if the place remembered what it tried to forget. Versions suggest that despite everything, one piece was still missing, because the second envelope mentioned a third name, and no one ever knew who had the courage or the interest to look for it.